So let's see here. So what do I want to do? What I want to do today is actually just tell you and walk through this group by method. And so what you're going to need to do is go to Kaggle, and you should have already known how to load the demand estimation notebook. Sorry, did I say Kaggle? I'm so sorry. I might go to Colab. Go to Google Colab and load your demand estimation notebook in from the GitHub repository. And if that does not make sense, then you should look back at the previous videos. So with the demand estimation notebook loaded, you're going to need to run the first block of code, which again, okay, so I got to sign into Google. Let's see, let me just sign in. See, this is what happens here. Sign in, Google. You know what I should do? Let me go to another one and sign in. So make sure, see, you got to sign in. I'll go ahead and just open up the IPNY notebook. This is demand estimation. And so with this open, now the very first thing we're going to need to do is connect to the Google server, to connect to the cloud. It's going to allocate us some RAM and some disk space. And with that all up and running, we can run this first block of code. Again, you'll probably get this kickback. It was not authored by Google. That's because I created this file. Go ahead and run it anyway. I'm not trying to hack your computer. What we're going to do, we've run through this, is we're just basically loading our data from our my GitHub repository, and it's the soda CSV file, and we're going to save this as a data frame. Okay, so with the data frame loaded, now we have it running in working memory here, and so I can now do things with this data frame file. And another thing too we need to run is we need to run this block down here, the second block, which is to set your date objects. Remember from the last videos that is that the date actually before was a string, and we configured that into a date time object, so it can be actually understood as a sequential series of events. Versus, think about a string of like a set of, so you could sort words. A string is like a word, right? So you can sort words like maybe you can put them in alphabetical order, but as far as dates go, it doesn't make much sense as far as like how to order a string. So we had to change that to a date time data type, which I did in that block. Okay, so I asked you before to go through and run these line by line, and hopefully you did. And the purpose of today is just to talk to you about this group by. And so I'm going to actually insert, and you can insert another line of code. Just to play with here. So remember our data frame, remember we can just look at it real quick if we want to with df head. And so, you know, what we have here again is we have shops within cities that are selling different brands of cola. Okay, and each brand also has maybe different types of capacities. You got 5 liters. Get different sizes of maybe within this, maybe adult cola has many different types of capacities, and so there's a lot of different variation. You've got within brand variation, which is the capacity, and maybe the container type is going to be changing within the brand. You know, you've got, those are actually, there's different types of brands that are being sold in certain shops, and you have shops that are all located within cities. So there's many different cities in Greece. And all of this also has another time or temporal variation. And so, and then the main objects that we're looking at here, we have price data and we have quantity data. Those are our numerical values. And so this is what they call disaggregated data. This data is all the way down, it's broken all the way down to this level, the shop product level. Now, the most disaggregated data you can possibly have would be something that you could think of like transaction data. It means every time like a customer comes in and buys buys one of these products, then that might be a row in that kind of data set. That would be extremely disaggregated. So here, actually, the data, you see it's, you see the date is actually a month. These are months for the stores. And I'll say that, that, you know, quantity of 10,000, this wasn't like somebody came in and bought 10,000 colas from the store. No, this actually happened over an entire month. So this data is actually aggregated up on the month level. But it's still fairly disaggregated. And what we can do here is use, sometimes what we're interested in are very specific sort of metrics about, you know, maybe what's the average quantity and prices within maybe like a certain city. So I want you to think, how would you answer that question? So now you've got a bunch of data quantities. If I were to ask you what was the, so these are by shops. If I were to ask you what was the average quantity sold within, or by city, then how could you do that? Well, to do that, to answer those questions, we're going to need to leverage this this method, which is group by. So if I call the data frame, this is df, that was our data set, I go dot group by, and then I'm going to do parenthesis, and I'm just going to do bracket to put in. So when I do bracket, I'm going to be able to group it by different categories. And if you see, what are the categories that we have here? The categories, the categorical variables of types, we have city. It's got Athens and different types of categories, right? Brand is also, like, there's different categories in brand. Container, capacity are categories. So if I asked you before, I said just average quantities by city. So, and I guess this would be monthly quantities. If I did group by city, and then I come outside the bracket, I'm going to add, I'm actually going to add another bracket. And what I'm going to put over here is what I want to actually, with the statistic I'm interested in. In this case, it would be quantity. And then after, so I've defined on the inside the group, I've defined on this outside bracket the this statistic, or this metric I'm interested in. And now actually what I wanted to find was the average, I think, is what I said. So in this case, I'm going to go dot, and I believe is it mean? I believe with I think this will do it. Yeah, there we go. So the mean, basically mean is another way to just say average. And that's what I call here as the method. And so I can see, you can look at this and look at, now what would this tell you? I want you to stop and think and pause and give us some interpretation here. Okay, so take a pause for a moment and interpret these statistics. I'm not sure I can pronounce the name correctly. Is it Patra? I haven't traveled to Greece, so pardon me if I'm mispronouncing this, but I think Patra, you see, it has this 41,000. They're obviously the highest number of averages. What does that mean? Okay, what is it? What's the interpretation? Give a second. Try to put that into words. Okay, pause the video. Put it into words. Okay, so now I'm going to say my interpretation. How I would interpret that statistic. Remember, you have to understand exactly what level, at the observation level, that's the shop level. So the interpretation of this will be that in Patra, the shops in Patra sell, on average, the most soda compared to to shops in other cities. So when we averaged by city, think about this. What were we averaging across? We were averaging across all the shops, right? So remember, you have to think of like a hierarchy. There's like cities, and then there's shops within the cities. And then there's also different products within the shops. So below the city we have the shops. And so the shops sold the most quantities, right? Now what if I wanted to ask the question, So it's very important with statistics that you understand about how to interpret statistics and how to cast like questions into statistical ways of thinking. And this is actually part of what I'm going to train you here today. So let me ask you another question. What if I said, which sodas are most popular in each city? Which brand of soda is most popular within each city? What statistic would you try to find? Okay, now you have a question, and now you need to find the statistic that answers that question. The question is, what brands of soda are most popular in each city? Well, most popular, what kind of things do we think of would measure popularity? Well, again, quantity, right? Like which ones sell the most? I say most popular. Just think, like, what metric do we have that is most linked? That's going to be maybe quantity. So we know it's going to be DF, and it's going to be some group by, and there's going to be some list of things inside here, and we know that on the outside what we want to have is we want to have quantity as our measure of popularity. And what's going to be, how are we going to group this? Well, on the inside we're going to have by city and also by brand, right? As to what brand within the cities are most popular. So quantity. And then we could also do this idea of, instead of mean, if I did the mean that I'm talking about, again, it's, remember, on the rows we have shops. So those are shops that are recording those. So I wouldn't want to average, because I'd be averaging highs and lows between shops. Actually, if I want to talk about pure popularity, maybe we could talk about looking at sum. So the total amount. Sum is that means to add everything up. So let's look at the total quantities of each brand in each city. It's just to think about that. Now that's going to be an imperfect measure, but let's go ahead and run this anyway. Okay, there we go. So you can see within Athens. Now what I can do is I can look within city, and I can see which soda pop sells the most within city. Okay, so we have adult cola. Let's see, what is this? This is going to be this gazoza is the most popular. Is gazoza most popular? Yes, in the city. Yes, it is. What about in Larissa? Ooh, God, this is just a very popular. Okay, it's very popular there too. If you look at all of the sodas in Larissa, this gazoza is like the popular Greek drink. Okay, what about Patra? Again, gazoza is like the main one. What about here? Is it the same also? Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it looks like this answer is the same, right? Doesn't matter what city we have. They're buying mainly gazoza. That's kind of interesting. I'm kind of curious to find out. Let's go look. What is gazoza? I don't even know. But it makes me feel like maybe I should go get some sometime, somewhere. Gazoza. Look at this. Okay, I don't even know. I'm curious. Why is it so popular? It must be good. They must like it, right? Like, why is it so popular? It's just intriguing. Very popular Greek drink in every single city. What about the least? So we can also look at the least. Least, okay. Well, out of all of these brands, you see this Kinder Cola in Athens. What about? It looks like Kinder Cola is not popular. Yeah, what about here? Kinder Cola. Looks like the preferences all seem very, very stable across these cities. That's kind of surprising. Kinder Cola is also the least. and Patra. Wow, it's just the same. They really have very similar tastes, right? I mean, even if I look at the second largest, here we get Orange Power versus Orange Power and Petra versus Orange Power and Larissa. Versus second highest is again Orange Power, and then what about in Athens? Again, it's Orange Power. So I mean, like the ordering of preferences across these is incredibly stable, and that's actually a little bit shocking to me. I would have thought that given the geographic heterogeneity that there would be a little bit more variation in their tastes. But actually you see by just doing some very simple summary statistics, we're starting to find out that these are in general looking kind of similar in terms of the order. Now, I said that this estimate was going to be a little bit biased, and I want to tell you something here. Look, when I'm looking at the total amount, the sum, and what I was doing is looking within each city. So I can look within each city and find out which one is the highest and lowest. But it gets a little bit problematic if I start comparing this statistic across cities. Why? Because I'm not just capturing popularity then. If I look between Athens and Petra, for example, I can actually see just straight off the bat that Athens is bigger. So you see the adult colas 105 versus 95, the Gazos as 170 versus 158, and so on. And so I see actually that what you have is when you have these kind of statistics, they're useful to sort of analyze within their category here, within their city. But when I start to analyze them across that category, then actually I'm not just capturing this idea about popularity, okay? Because I'm also capturing things like the size of the market. And so there's some kind of a scale bias that I have when comparing statistics across the categories. But within a category, I can sort of get some meaningful interpretations. Anyway, the point is that, look, I could also find out if I wanted to, I wonder if I can do this, just keep, I'm not sure if this is going to be valid or not. Actually, some max. Okay, I did this. This was the max out of all of them. What if I did this? Quantity max. This is going to be actually by the row, not by the sum. So actually with this, because I was going down the rows, I'm just playing with this. So basically what you can do is you can type in different functions afterwards. So when I typed in max here, clearly what it's doing is looking for the maximum. It's the maximum, so looking across the rows, this is the maximum quantity that was within each of these categories. And that's just one, that's sort of like the one maximum value, which is, remember, it's by the shop. And so just remember what your statistics, how they're ordered. But anyway, I think the point was here is to really just show you how group by can be used to categorize different groups and summarize things. You could also do this adding, I could look at the price and ask you some other questions. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you I'm actually ask you other questions. You will find down here what I did is, so one interesting plot by group by is I grouped by date. So when I group by date, that's kind of interesting. I'll just tell you about that. So look at this code right here. Now we should be able to clearly see. I'm using group by. I'm going to group by the date, which means I'm looking at each of the dates. And the statistic I'm interested in is the price. And I'm talking about the average price. It doesn't make sense to add prices together. Actually, we want to do some kind of average. And then I just plotted this. So that's it. So instead of just adding means and other things, I can also do plots. And this was kind of a nice one because what it does is then by date, it gives me a plot of the average of all prices. I'm just kind of curious, what would happen if I did by date I need to add, oh, I got brackets there already. And what if I just did by city? Is this going to mess me up? That's going to look ugly. That's not going to be right. You can play with some of these things. What about by city date? No. I'm going to have to reshape some of these. Anyway, it's you can kind of play with these. Price, the quantity. No, the mean quantity might not be. So price is way down here. Quantity is there. That's the mean quantity. That's a very interesting pattern, by the way. I'm going to leave some of these things to your interpretation. I'd say just it's very interesting just to type and play around with these things. Like we did. Let's do quantity, mean. What about the quantity sum? Look at that. This almost looks too perfect. It's hard to say what's going on here. There's some very interesting things here. I think you should look at these data and think about like what I'm typing now, and look at. I mean, we found some very interesting pattern here. This is a very interesting pattern. I mean, you see something. You see an interesting temporal variation here, which is what we're going to call seasonality. So when you look over time and you see something that's just repeating itself, and you see year over year, this is actually revealing some sort of a season, that there's some sort of a seasonality in this demand. And I guess it makes sense. There's the end of one year, the end of it, it's the beginning of one year, and the beginning of 2015, the end of 2015. So in the middle is going to be summertime. It looks like people really demand a lot of this. They demand soft drinks in the summer, and they don't demand them so much in the winter time. That's what it looks like. And then it's very interesting because there's one spike. And what is that spike? Actually, I might just leave that for you to find out as data scientists, maybe to figure out what that spike in the demand is. But that's something to look at. There's seasonality with a spike. And again, this is all just sort of some analytics that came from looking at the groupby function and plotting it, and just doing some basic interpretations. It actually can be fairly powerful to help guide your process of learning about what this data is actually trying to tell you. That's where I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to ask you some questions as homeworks, and you'll have to use this function to answer them. So I hope this video was a little bit instructive about how to use the groupby function, but also a little bit instructive just about how to be curious with a data set and how to just like look at it, also how to interpret and give some interpretation to some of the statistics.